did you get time to read the first article?
Ma'am, it was the cinema one, right? The one that was part of the encyclopedia.
Exactly, exactly.
Yes, yes. Did read it.
Okay, good. Could you read all of it, or did you read just part of it?
Half of it. Like I'm up till gender, the part where they talk about gender representation in the in Pakistani cinema. So,
Okay, good.
Miss, can I ask a question?
Gigi, sure.
Miss, like I was reading about they mentioned the movie Zarka, and they said that usually women are also, this is one of the tropes, women are represented as nationalists. So however, like I tried watching the movie a bit, and it seemed sort of revolutionary for that time, because the description said that they were like Habib Jalib wrote the songs and all for it. So it seemed like to go against him. It seemed very politically relevant for that time, since it talked of anti-imperialism and all of that. So I wanted to ask you, how exactly does that movie then become a stereotypical representation of women? Because it felt like it was a very revolutionary representation, and an active representation of women in politics.
Okay, this article is about representations of women. So you would find definitely a lot of stereotypes here as well, right? Because in Pakistani culture, we have this, like we always talk about good women and bad women, and we believe that good women are the women who believe in traditions and norms, etc. So this article actually focuses on images of women, like how women have been represented. It does talk about stereotypes. So as far as Zarka, yes, she's different. So is uh, the other woman in if you reach that point of the article where it starts discussing Aurat Raj.
I didn't go up to that point yet.
Okay. Okay, what we'll do that we will generally start discussing the article. Do you guys know me by face?
We've only seen pictures of you.
All right, that's interesting. Okay, so I think you've been around for 2 years, so you may have seen me walking on campus, but I think
Yes, probably.
you may have not either, because I used to come quite early in the morning before university started, and I used to leave around 2, 3, or 4 at times. I left, by 2:30 after my class, most of the times. So, okay,
I know you by face because I once accidentally barged in your office. I was
okay.
actually going somewhere else and in someone else's office, and I came into yours, and I disturbed you because you were talking to someone. And I'm glad that you did not scold me or anything because I was really, freaked out
No,
that,
no, it's perfectly fine.
I.
Why would I scold you? I think there was no private meeting going on at the time, and normally I do not have such private meetings. So
Yeah,
most of the
actually,
time,
we don't
students are
we
walking
can't
in.
expect. We don't know what to expect now from, especially when the other person is at a higher position than you are. They can scold you. I mean, the way teachers are around us at times. I'm glad that teachers in my department, they are way too friendly with us, but we do get scared of teachers in other departments, and we don't know because even Abibi, jab we were taking your course, so we were asking each other, have you taken a course from her? Do you know how she is with the class? And we weren't sure that before talking about certain things, and we are always curious that how the instructor is. So yeah, I'm actually glad I took your course.
All right. I think you would find students who would have probably both kind of opinions.
True.
Students are always like that. And teachers try to do their job, and my job is like I expect a certain type of skills when it comes to writing. So that's why I keep insisting that I want first draft, and which means in the form of assignment. And when students write assignment, I help them write their midterm paper or final paper. So I take that kind of route that we are developing paper start from the start of the semester. So I thought that yesterday in the last class I did not introduce me to yourself. Uh, so I would, before starting today's class, I would say that I did my bachelor's in advertising from NCA, and then I did masters in television documentary from Goldsmiths College, University of London. And then I went on my Fulbright to Oklahoma State University, and then I did my PhD from University of the Punjab. So that's it. And yes, I have written a lot of articles on war films and also on gender in Pakistani film, right? So that was by accident that I started working on gender in Pakistani films, and then I kept doing a lot of work on gender in Pakistani films.
Um,
Okay.
Miss, this is just sort of a not exactly a personal question, but what exactly motivated you to join this field? Because I'm assuming there are very few academics who join or are formally writing upon this TV and film.
Uh, See, I did my bachelor's from NCA, which means I did my bachelor's in advertising and graphic design. And when I was working in ad agencies, I started making TV commercials, and it was diverting all the time because from TV commercials, I ended up making TV programs and TV commercials. And from TV programs and TV commercials, eventually I was selected for my Fulbright for studies in screen studies. Screen studies means film and television studies. So that's why I went to Oklahoma State. And there, so you can say that it was because all these fields are interconnected or related in one way or the other. So that's how I ended up doing this.
Okay, okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so let's go back to today's reading. Uh, I'm turning the video off because I think we need better connection. And yesterday I had serious problems with electricity at home because the night earlier had no electricity whole night, and UPS actually stopped working because we did not have electricity for quite long. Okay, so today's reading is on representations of women in Pakistani film. And as I said, that this is an encyclopedia entry, so it starts a bit differently. It starts as an article for public at large. So at the start, it is just telling you where Pakistani industry comes from, because Pakistani film industry has its origin in Indian uh, musical theater. Do you agree or disagree?
Ma'am, could you please repeat the question?
Um, I, I said Pakistani film has roots in Indian musical theater, and I asked you if you agree with it or if you do not agree with it.
I do agree with it.
Okay. And why do you agree with it?
Because the theater and the music and the films were being made before 1947, and all of these artists worked together, and I think that the roots are, I think, the same. They started off together. If you look at Noor Jahan, she was singing before 1947 and in India, and then later on here. So I do feel that they have roots there.
You are saying both the films have same roots.
Yeah, I
Miss,
do have this
sorry,
idea of,
sorry.
yeah.
Miss, I'd
Um,
also like to
Miss,
add.
like there's another point that the shared culture, which is like the music and the sort of performing arts related jitni bhi like fields thi, the way they came about all of South Asia were sort of shared before partition, so
All
like
right.
long before partition.
Miss, there, I'd also like to add that we have a deep history with India, and which is revolving around our folk tales and our folklore in general. And that was also written with a lot of poetry, performance, and music. So I would say it's embedded into our history.
Okay. All right. Uh, you are correct that both Indian and Pakistani film have same roots.
Ma'am, your mic is off. I mean, there's mute.
Yes, I said you are correct that Indian and Pakistani cinema have similar roots and similar origin, and Pakistani and Indian film have roots in Indian classical or Indian classical musical theater. And that theater had existed in India for a very long time, for centuries, before film actually was born. Okay. This article actually says that when Pakistan was created, uh, British India was producing 240 films per annum. And out of those 240 films, Pakistan was producing 6 films, which means uh, where we live today, Lahore was producing 6 films at the time Pakistan was created. Okay, all right. And if you look at reference, as I said, we will need references in all of our work. It says Malik 1963. Malik is actually Pakistani filmmaker Pervez Malik. And until I found his thesis in the archives of University of Southern California, I did not know that Pervez Malik was a graduate of University of Southern California. It's a private school in California, and it is, I think, perhaps the most expensive school in Southern California even today. So this information about how many films Pakistan was producing at the time of its creation was actually found in Pervez Malik's master's thesis or bachelor's thesis that is now available online with University of Southern California. So most of the times we are thinking that Pakistani filmmakers are not educated or they do not have much education in filmmaking, but Pervez Malik apparently was highly qualified for Pakistan uh, back in 1960s and 70s. It says that it also mentions, you may have seen it mentions Second World War here. So what it basically means that around the time Pakistan was created, Pakistan became independent in 1947, and we had World War until 1944, and people of British India were actually fighting World War II for British government. So it has, so our uh, cinema in this part of the world was affected because of the World War. How was it affected? Because we needed stock for making films. Stock means we needed print for shooting films, and it was extremely expensive at the time because British government had increased taxes on film stock and materials that were needed for making films. So film production was actually very expensive after World War II in British India, right? Here it briefly mentions what kind of studios we had in Lahore when Pakistan became independent. So we had Pancholi Studio, we had City Studio, Upper Mall, Upper India Studio, Northern India Studio, Lahore Cine Studio, and Screen and Sound Studio. Pakistan government actually allotted these people to different studios and their names changed. For example, we have Shahnoor Studio on Multan Road. So Pancholi became, I believe it was Pancholi that became Shahnoor Studio because it was allotted to Madam Noor Jahan and her husband Shaukat Hussain Rizvi, right? So after that it says uh, production, it's just talking about when Pakistan became independent. It was extremely difficult to get production supplies for making films, and many of the film directors actually left Pakistan. And Noor Jahan came from India. Certain other people came from India, but many also left Pakistan. East Pakistan was not making films until the end of 1950s, which means East Pakistan made its first film during 1950s. In the time of British India, East Pakistan was not making any films uh, because they thought Dhaka was not suitable for making films because of rains. Camera is very sensitive to rain and other things. So if you keep reading rest of the article, you would find that it says that when Pakistan was created, government actually allotted all these studios to people who knew, filmmakers knew about. The government gave the studios to filmmakers, but government gave cinemas to people who hardly knew anything about film. So they were different kind of businessmen, and that's why you can see that when they were allotted cinemas, a number of cinemas reduced over the years, right? Because certain cinemas were eliminated altogether, and people built plazas in place of cinemas. And also, Pakistan was not producing enough number of films because we made only one film in 1948 and three films in 1949 and six films uh, I think the following year, and then 10 films the next year. You can say that number of films was increasing over a period of time, but as a matter of fact, uh, the number was not sufficient for exhibiting in cinemas because I think we had a large number of cinemas all over Pakistan, even at the time when film was created, when Pakistan was created. So Pakistan was importing films from India, and India was importing films from Pakistan at the time. But by 1950s, Pakistan government demanded that it should have, in fact, filmmakers demanded that Pakistan should have only barter relationship with India, that which meant that if we are getting one from India, India should buy one film from us. Do you think it was a good decision?
Ma'am, could you please repeat that again?
I'm asking that when Pakistan became independent, after a few years, Pakistani filmmakers, Pakistani producers and directors demanded that we should have a barter policy with India, which means India should get one film from us and we should get one film from them. And we should export and import equal number of films from each other. I'm asking, do you think if it was a good decision?
Ma'am, are there any information about how it affected our economy when this policy was carried out?
It was 1950s. I think it was 1952.
1952.
Yeah.
Now
I
I'm
mean,
still
In
thinking
fact,
that
1956. In 1956, look here. It says in 1956, Pakistan signed a barter policy with India for the import and export of films. I'm asking, do you think it was a good decision?
Ma'am, like just this is just a hunch, but the reception of Pakistani movies must have been very affected by the politics of that time, and it was only like a decade ago partition had happened, so I'm assuming कि relationships the कि वो इतने well perceived नहीं होंगे, and also कि even at that time the quality of Indian movies was very different from Pakistani movies. They were being produced uh, on a much larger budget than, let's say, Pakistani movies, I'm
Yes.
assuming.
All right. Earlier, I said that British India was producing 240 films at the time. And for exhibiting 240 films, it had cinemas all over British India. It had a large number of cinemas even in Pakistan. And if Pakistan produced only one film in 1947, Pakistan could not exhibit that one film in, it says, 290 movie theaters in Pakistan in 1947, right? So you think that one film, Teri Yaad, was sufficient for exhibiting in 290 cinemas in Pakistan at the time, back in 1947?
No, ma'am.
So one Pakistani film was not sufficient for exhibition in these cinemas. Which country is bigger?
India.
India is much larger, right?
Yeah.
So we were not producing sufficient number of films for our theaters. We had 290 cinemas and we had produced only one film in 1947 and three films in 1948 and six in 1949. 1950. So these films were not sufficient for exhibiting in such a large number of cinemas. Secondly, when we asked for barter policy, we reduced the size of our market, didn't we? Because if we sent one film to India, if we had 290 movie theaters in Pakistan, I'm not sure how many movie theaters we had in India in 1947. But you can understand that there were too many cinemas all over British India, and I would assume that, I'm not sure, but I think that overall number may have been 700-800, which means, or even more, perhaps 1,000 or more, because Parthe Fryer from France has been building cinemas all over India. So British government had given the contract of building cinemas to a French company, and they were investing in cinema business in British India all the time. So it's not written anywhere here, but I think it was a bad decision to have a barter policy with India, because we had a large market in the form of India for our films, and while India was getting a smaller market for its films exhibition in Pakistan. When we asked for barter policy, we reduced the size of our market to 1/6. Okay. So Pakistan, it says Pakistan imported 214 romantic films from India from 1948 to 1953. If it imported 214,
Ma'am?
you can easily guess that it had exported hardly 15 to 20 films and imported 214 films. Ji. I was just trying to make you a bit familiar with the background of Pakistani film, and we will quickly go to the representations of women. Ji.
Ma'am, I had a question regarding the barter policy. Hypothetically, wouldn't this have also resulted in Pakistani films to more recognition for our films if they were like distributed and shown in India?
What
Or
actually?
did the political actually result in them not wanting to show more films from Pakistan?
Actually, what had happened that Pakistan had produced a film, Dupatta, and Noor Jahan was the protagonist of the film. And this film was very successful in India. And another film that was released in India was probably not that successful as opposed to Pakistani film Dupatta. And what happened, that the Indian cinema that had exhibited Pakistani film Dupatta at the time was burnt by local Indians or Hindus, right? So Pakistani filmmaker actually reacted to that incident, and this barter policy was actually the result of that incident. So what was your question exactly?
Ma'am, I was basically asking that hypothetically, if the Pakistani films were shown and viewed in India, and since they had a larger market and number of people attending the cinemas, wouldn't that have potentially gained our films more recognition at the time, and maybe
Yes,
more demand?
not
They
only
were
not only recognition, because see, if we exported only 20 films to India and imported 214 films from India, it also means that our 20 films were exhibited in more cinemas in India, and Indian films were exhibited in lesser number of cinemas in Pakistan. So there are two ways of looking at things, that if we are sending only 20 films and we are getting back 214 films, audience will watch the film that is more successful. So we were definitely getting revenue for whatever number of films we sent to India at the time. And India was getting revenue from us for exhibiting its films. Film is a business, end of the day. So it's both recognition, it's also about integration. Because when we learn about other cultures through films, we try to understand their culture, and eventually we can integrate between cultures, right?
yes.
So, okay. Here is an image. I wonder if you can see the image. It says figure 1 and figure 2.2. I think you can probably click and look at the images. That would only show how Pakistan industry was behaving after partition. Now, the next heading is the roots of Pakistani song and dance formula. It says Pakistani romantic musicals have their roots in classical Indian musical theater. And Indian understood here to mean South Asia broadly, not the post-1947 nation state, right? We are not talking about India today, we are talking about India that was there before 1947. And it also says that because in classical theater, dancing is a form of worship for gods, right? The artist expresses his emotions or the story through the hands gesture or mudras. So I think we all know that in Hindu religion, dance is the dance performance is actually divine. It is performed for the god in many cases, and you will find dance performance in Hindu temples, right? In one of the encyclopedias, I think it was an encyclopedia from Iran, I was surprised to read in an entry that somebody said that Muslims did not have theater until perhaps the 20th century. I had difficulty believing it, but I believe that somebody was writing about it, and he wrote about it because he felt that Muslims link performance to idolatry. So it is hardly possible that Muslims were performing on theater until the last couple of centuries. Then I checked it with a number of other people who belong to literature or who belong to theatrical performance or who are in film. I just wanted to verify what I had read and what different people said and what different pieces of information I collected. It only meant that Muslims brought different forms of theater to India, and Muslims also brought different stories to India. For example, you mentioned Zarqa. There was also Laila Majnu and other Arabian Night stories that were brought to India, and they became part of Indian classical theater in one way or the other. Ji.
Yes, there was also Sony Mom,
Soni
which brought.
Mahiwal. Did you say Soni Mahiwal?
Yes, ma'am.
मैम सॉरी
जी जी बताएं.
मैम मेरा ये क्वेश्चन था कि so you know there were a lot of invasions and a lot of Muslim जो cultures थे उन पे at least influences आए थे from Persian and Afghani side and all. So ma'am, like Sufi dance is something that was it prevalent in South Asia, or at least performed in more Muslim gatherings or something, or did it not? Was it not taken up? And other than that, ma'am, the like this is very common now, which is that we see a lot of performance on Sufi shrines. So was it also the case at that time, or did it not come about then?
I'm sure the exchange was there in past centuries, right? Because people were traveling all over the world. There were travelers, and travelers were writing about cultures, and there were people coming to India. For example, I think I can talk about my own family because my family says that they had migrated to India about 200 years ago, right? So I would say that there were many other people who were traveling to, and India even today accepts people from different countries. For example, I traveled to Iran back in 2014, and I met a couple of different Iranians who had actually shifted to India, and they were coming to Iran because they were Iranian nationals, but they said they had decided to live in India on more permanent basis. So people from different professions were definitely coming to India, and artists were also coming to India. So there was an exchange, but there was no new media 200 years ago. So there was less information. But definitely these stories that Muslims had brought to India from different parts of the world and different kind of performances were actually brought to India. So
Sorry,
yes,
ma'am. Ma'am, so basically Muslim forms of those forms of performance pertaining to Muslim culture weren't formalized into theater the same way that Hindu traditional or classical dance was in some ways.
Hindu classical dance has a very long history. So, and our Pakistani film has its roots in classical theater of India or dance forms of India. It says here that hand gestures and mudras were very popular, Bharatnatyam and Natya Yoga. So all of these forms were performances, they were divine performances and were performances for God. So Muslims had the forms of expressions or form of theater, but I would say that Indian classical theater was definitely, especially the dance forms, were far superior because Islam does not support dance. And Islam and these performances would look like idolatry. So Islam will not support this kind of dance. But you mentioned Sufi dance. Um, have you seen performances by women in recent years, or did you come across any images of women performing this form of dance in the past centuries?
Miss, not in the past centuries. I'm only aware that in Muslim courts, boy Hindu classical dancing would be done by courtesans, but this has just, I think now it's become very popular. It's inserted in every other music video or any other show. So I haven't come across any representation or picture or images in the past century, Abhita.
Right. So that's what I was saying. Even
Now
I
when we
believe belly dance has been there for quite some time. So actually, we'll have to look in the history of both Sufi dance and belly dance to understand how long these performances have been there. And I would believe that it would be quite long, and it would be there for perhaps, I'm not sure how many centuries, but it would be there. But definitely, Indian classical dance theater is older, right?
Yes, yes.
So, yes, here it is giving you just, it's telling you about popular forms of classical musical theater of India. And it says uh, Bharatnatyam, Odissi, Kuchipudi, Kathak. I believe it would be difficult for most of us to remember all of these names, but definitely Kathak and Bharatnatyam are very popular. And then Kathakali and Manipuri and Satya. Kathakali is very similar to Kathak, so perhaps we would generally remember these things. It's these dance forms focus on the way we walk or hand gestures. So I would say that if I'm sure you must have seen these dance performances, and it says Emperor Akbar was definitely sponsoring these forms. So we can say that in 16th century, Muslims had definitely connected to these dance forms. Cinema was introduced in 1896. So Muslims were part of this classical dance theater of India 300 years before cinema was introduced in India, right? So that's why I'm saying that because Muslims were there and Muslims were ruling, so definitely Muslim stories and Muslim kind of theatrical or art performances, and even because you may have heard of shadow puppets, etc., right? So shadow puppetry, Muslims had used shadow puppetry and other forms of puppetry. So you can say that these forms of expression or art were actually mixed into classical musical theater of India. So that's why I'm saying that Pakistani film has its roots in Indian classical musical theater. Okay,
Okay, yes, thank you.
all right. Um, so here it talks about the prohibition on idolatry in Islam hindered formal development of dance in Islamic cultures. So that's why I'm saying uh, uh, somebody actually wrote about this in an encyclopedia that Islamic cultures prohibited dance performances. That's why it was not developing that deeply as it developed in India. Then it does say about belly dancers that had been there in Middle East and North Africa. Okay. Um, Durriya Qazi is head of Visual Communication Department at University of Karachi. Durriya did mention courtesans that somebody mentioned in class just now. So these were 19th century courtesans, and people in elite families in India used to send their sons to these courtesans for some sort of training in literature. And so you can see that because these courtesans had deep interest in poetry, so you can say that they influenced, and this culture, this character actually appears in Pakistani and Indian films in the form of Umrao Janada. You may have heard of Umrao Jan, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you have seen the film, you would know that she had deep interest in poetry, and she was a great poet at the time. All right. So
Yes.
then it says that when I said that different kind of stories were brought to India, so here is a list of stories, some of the stories that were brought to India from Arab countries, Iran or Iranian Balochistan. You can see it here. It says Amir Hamza from Middle East, Laila Majnu, Zulekha and Yusuf from Arabia, Shiri Farhad from Iran, Rustam Sohrab from Sistan, which is Balochistan, part of Balochistan that belongs to Iran. Ji, did you want to say something? Okay, so now gender role in cinema, and when India started exhibiting films, British government conducted a survey back in 1927-28 in, I believe, 26 states that were part of the colony, right? So they conducted survey on film viewership from Lahore to Rangoon to Burma, and about 4,500 people responded to the survey questionnaire back in 1927. Report was published in 1928, and you can say that researchers had come from UK and people from India were part of the group because they had to collect information from Muslims, from Hindus, and from people of any other religion, race, creed, or culture. All right. If you want to look at that survey, that's a big book. It is about 270 pages long. I won't ask you to read 270 pages, but I can definitely upload it in Google Classroom. This information here is extracted from that book. It says that Muslims had difficulty coming to cinemas with women back in 1927-28 because Muslims had Zanan Khana and Mardan Khana at their houses, and if there were guests at people's home, women will go to Zanan Khana and men will sit in Mardan Khana. Have you heard these terminologies?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So it was so because of Parda, that meant special segregation of men and women. So when they interviewed or shared survey questionnaires with Muslims, they said it is difficult for women to go with men to cinemas and watch films. All right. And in that book on Cinema Report of India from 1928, some of the Muslims also said that most of the films do not represent Muslim culture. For example, first Indian film was produced in 1913. Do you know the title of the film? Raja Harish Chandra. So Raja Harish Chandra focused on Hindu culture, and in the film you could see Hindu gods and goddesses appearing, and they felt that we cannot watch a film that represents Hindu culture and not Muslim culture. So apart from Zanan Khana and Mardan Khana, Muslims also objected to the content of film. They felt it was not suitable for Muslims. And because Americans, Spanish people, and people from Italy and France were bringing their films to India, Muslims said their films, foreign films are also not suitable for us because they have sexuality in them. So Muslims were actually objecting to all sort of films. Muslims were objecting to films that were produced by Hindus, and Muslims were objecting to films that were brought by Americans, French, British, and Italian and Spanish people to India in the pre-partition era.
Miss, I had a question.
The-
This was, I just needed to double check. This was before partition, and the Muslims we're talking about, from which exact area were they coming from?
I said that British government conducted a survey of 26 states. For example, if we are talking about Bombay, and if we are talking about different parts of India, for example, we have 4 provinces in Pakistan. British government had divided it into 26 different states, right? They had divided British India into 26 different states at the time. So they had shared a survey questionnaire with 4,500 people. It took them about a year to collect data from 4,500 people. So these people were Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, and all other and people from all other races, creed, cultures, and religion who lived in India, who lived in British India at the time. I said they had conducted a survey of 4,500 people. So I said I can share that survey with you. It's quite long. If you type find Muslim, you will actually find Muslim in the PDF or Islam in the PDF. So you can quickly read what Muslims were saying about cinema. Back in 1927, I said Hindus had produced first film, Raja Harishchandra, that showed gods and goddesses and story of a Raja who was punished by gods and goddesses. And Muslims said that this content is not suitable for us. This content does not represent our culture, our values, and anything that you can talk about. They said this film is not suitable for Muslims. So Muslims objected to Raja Harishchandra type of films, and Muslims also objected to films that were brought from at least 5 different countries in Europe and America, right? They said foreign films have sexuality, and our women practice parda. So we cannot take our women to cinemas with us, because women do not go out with men to public places to watch films, right? And then they also said that the content of foreign films is not suitable for us because of sexuality. For instance, first film ever produced back in 1896 was about, it focused on scandals of Queen of England, right? So scandals means, again, something that was not suitable or immoral in the eyes of Muslims of India at that time. So they thought that they cannot take their women to show such films. And then back in 1924, America produced a film, Daughters of Today. You may have heard Lahore's first film was also Daughters of Today. And I do feel that first Lahori film, Daughters of Today, may have been a replica of the Hollywood Daughter of Today. And the Hollywood film in 1924 was actually showing that a girl from a village had come to the city, and she joined university for higher studies, and she started dating young men, and she was going to parties, having alcohol, etc. So one night somebody tried to sleep with her, and she refused, but the person was later found dead. So the girl was arrested, and then her cousin came from village and saved her, proving that she had not murdered the guy who tried to rape her, right? So in the end, the film proved that you do not, you can go to cities for studies, but you cannot socialize with men who were not right for you. So it was, the film was focusing on certain type of value system. So I would imagine that the Lahori daughter of today was probably a replica the of the Hollywood daughter of today, because Hollywood film was produced in 1924 and the Lahori film was produced in 1927. So I'm only guessing it was perhaps an adaptation of that film at the time. Ji. So did you understand how the data was collected and why it was collected? Because they wanted to promote film industry in India
Yes.
back in 20th century, and they wanted to understand what type of films would sell in India. So a film like on Scandals of Queen was not suitable for people of India, because in India people believe sex is base, and heterosexual exposure, even between husband and wife, insults women, denigrates women. So Indians were rejecting sexual content in cinema even 100 years ago. So this survey was conducted in 1927. We are in 2020. So you can say the survey was conducted about 93 years ago.
Miss, I had two questions. Firstly, could we trace back to how this change actually came about? Because when we look at Mughal India and the art they produced, it was actually comfortable and there were laws comfortable regarding homosexuality and sexuality in general. So where did this consideration of sex as base and parda evolve from?
Don't you think sex is considered base
There's
today?
a marked difference in the Muslim mentality during the Mughal Empire and then British India.
All right, you are talking about art forms.
Yes,
Uh,
because we all, I mean, society does influence it. So at first, during the Mughal times and before that, before British India, basically, the, they were South Asians were more comfortable with the concept of sex and sexuality. And
uh,
after that, it changed. So what caused this, which influenced the media and
all right.
mindsets?
I'll go back to your question, but before that, I would ask you one question. Have you come across Ajanta and Ellora caves?
No.
Um, can you see this screen?
Yes.
All right. So
Yes.
you can see I'm on CMS right now. I'll open another tab. I
Okay.
will write Ajanta caves, right? Now, when you write Ajanta or Ellora caves, this is what you get.
Miss, I can only see the PDF.
I am trying to open images with people. Ajanta sculptures. All right. Can you see the sculptures now?
No, miss, I can
Keep
only see the
sharing
PDF.
I think your browser with us because right now you're only sharing PDF.
All right. So that's what I was asking, that if you can see this image now. Can you see this image now?
Yes, ma'am.
And you can clearly see these sculptures are nudes or semi-nudes, right?
Yes.
And so if you look for Ajanta and Ellora cave sculptures, you will actually find a number of sexual forms in these caves, and this art is hundreds of years old, right? So what I meant, that these sculptures were there in India all these centuries, So we can probably say that Islam had an influence on India, and a very strong influence. And what you said about art during Mughal era, I think I would say that not all people uh, go to exhibitions or see exhibitions or paintings and sculptures. Do you agree?
Yes, ma'am.
So I can't exactly say where this concept came from, but I can definitely say that Islam influenced culture of India, and it started influencing culture of India about 1300 years ago, because at least 1300 years ago, because we say that Muhammad bin Qasim came here in 712, right? So you can perhaps say that, and right now we are talking about Muslims' reaction to cinema at the start of 20th century, right? So Muslims were objecting to content. Definitely you will find uh, much liberal content during Mughal era, because particularly it mentioned Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar, and it's right here, because it said that Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar started sponsoring different forms of dance performances in India in the 16th century. And Akbar was very liberal. Akbar did not believe in, he believed in religious pluralism. And he himself married Jodha, and he encouraged Muslims to marry non-Muslims during his era. In 20th century, we try not to encourage such marriages in Pakistan today, do we?
Hello, ma'am, your voice cut. I didn't hear the last part after religious.
I said Akbar believed in religious pluralism,
Yes.
right? Akbar wanted to learn about all religions. He had a place called Ibadat Khana. Initially, he invited only Muslims of different sects, right? So Shias, Sunnis, Wahhabis, whoever existed at the time came to Akbar's Ibadat Khana to have discussions. But then Akbar he was bored with Muslims' discussions or debate, because they could not answer questions and they kept telling each other, there is no proof of what you are saying. So Akbar started inviting Christians, uh, Jains, Hindus and Sikhs, and talk about any religion. Zoroastrians, he started inviting them to Ibadat Khana, and then he started believing in religious pluralism, and he uh, believed that Muslims should marry non-Muslims. It happened about 500 years ago. In today's world, we do not believe in religious pluralism, and Pakistan has its roots in two-nation theory, right? So Akbar actually did not believe in two nation because he believed in religious pluralism and he believed in one nation within the borders. So I'm saying that you can say, we can't say where this sexist base exactly came from, but Islam was influencing India for 1300 years now. And Muslims in this part of the world still believe in sexist base. I'm talking about people at large. Popular culture, I'm not talking about, uh, like uh, elite or poor in Pakistan may still be very liberal, but I think majority of the people have a tendency of believing in what is written here. And honor killing exists in this part of the world because people like believing that sex is base, right? and
Yes,
women are required to maintain their honor. It says men personalize women and worry about their honor all the time. Okay, so I think somebody mentioned duality yesterday. So men, in many cases or in some cases, do not worry about their own honor. They definitely worry about woman's honor. Okay, so it just says that Muslims were objecting to type of content that was shown in films back in 1920s, and they felt that foreign films had sexuality, foreign films were immoral and could make people immoral, and if you want to exhibit films in India, you have to avoid immorality and sexuality. So you can understand these were the guidelines for Hollywood films or Western films to sell in India in the coming years. Okay.
Miss, I have a question. In this very article, it was written that a lot of Pakistani movies showed violence towards women, and such scenes and the women being saved by the men became the crux of any story to also represent men themselves. So, ma'am, did they also keep the same image of matlab ke, did they also consider representations of this violence as a form of impurity, and if so, why did they not why did they also represent it in such a glorified manner and matlab in a lot of Pakistani movies?
Right. You are talking about something that article says Duriya Kazi said it, right? And because I think Duriya wrote probably after a very, very long time, she wrote an article on Pakistani film back in 2006. And if you start looking back, you'll find Mushtaq Ghazda's book was printed in 1990s. And then there was about 10-year gap, and then Duriya wrote an article on Pakistani film. And she did say that Pakistani films focus on women because most of them are romantic musicals. So they focus on women. And the stories revolve around women. Men are trying to save them from rapists, or they are singing and dancing around them, because early Urdu films actually showed dancing heroes. And Punjabi film actually eliminated the dancing hero of Urdu film, because if you look at Punjabi films, uh, male hero keeps standing in one place. For example, you just type on YouTube any of the Punjabi songs title, and you'll find that woman is dancing around the male, and male is just standing there doing nothing. Punjabi song. Can you think of a Punjabi song?
Miss, there are so many. Um, like the the only
And I
exception that
remember there's this film, Sayed Noor's film, Churiyan.
Okay, can you
Usme
think of a song?
hey Ghana, I'm just trying to think. There's Momin Rana and this girl who is dancing in the rain,
All
and
right,
he's
so do you see
walking
it here?
around and
there's one song that recently Sarmat Khosar also made a play on. It was sung by Madam Noorja and
Sorry, let me turn off the sound. Ji. So
it was
what you said, the Sarmat Khusat.
yes, Sarmat Khosar recently also a year or so ago he made a play inspired by Noorjahan's song called Janjir Deepava.
Jhanjhar Thi Hawa. Okay, do you want me to find that song? Because right now I think there is a song at this point in the film in Churiya, and I'm not sure. I'll find the song you
I was
mentioned
just
as well.
mentioning.
All right. So what did Mohammad Rana do just now? Did you see? Could you see the clip?
no,
I
ma'am,
can't
we
see
get
the
No, we couldn't see
audio.
the clip.
Oh God, I do not like Zoom for this reason, because on Hangout you can see right away. All right, let me play it again. All right, so you know what I meant, that Punjabi film actually eliminated dancing heroes from films.
Yes.
Because what Durya Kazi is saying, that Urdu films had dancing heroes and Punjabi film has macho heroes. So macho man does not dance. And Durya Kazi actually says that with the arrival of, or with the popularity of Punjabi film, dancing hero of Urdu film disappeared because Punjabi film considered him fake. Like Urdu films were showing fake heroes. They were not macho, so they were fake. And Punjabi film focused on masculinity. So these masculine heroes were not dancing. So this was Duriya's observation. That article is also available and online. I can actually post that article also. Where you read Visual Pleasure, I think I would post that article there. Gee, any comments so far? Because I think this is again from Pervez Malik. He divided Pakistani films into 7 types of 7 different types. First is romantic musical. Then, for example, Pakistan produced Koil with Noor Jahan in 1956, Yakke Wali with Yakke Wali and Intizar. Yakke Wali was with Musarrat Nazir. Then Pakistan produced historical films which are also romantic musicals like Anarkali in 1958. And I believe everybody knows Anarkali's story. She fell in love with the prince, and Akbar, Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar, despite patronizing art and artists, buried her alive for falling in love with the prince. Then Pakistan also produced folklores like Ishq-e Laila on the tragedy of Laila and Majnu from Arabia, 7th century Arabia. Pakistan has produced fantasy films like Ali Baba, 1970. Pakistan produced social films like Kismat. I mentioned it yesterday. I said it is from 1950s. And the doctor ended up marrying the elder sister who had only studied in school for 8 grades, for studying up to 8 grades. And then Pakistan has been producing crime films like Street 77, Daku Ki Ladki, and Raz. So Street 77 is slightly different name. It sounds more like a foreign film, but it was a Pakistani film. And then Pakistan produced slapsticks like Behrupia, Mahi Munda, and Pinga. Do you know what Mahi Munda means?
A tomboy.
Yes, precisely. All right. So Pakistani films, how Pakistani films have been representing women. So it just says in Pakistani films, even if we have women in all films, I think I mentioned that in Pakistan, first film was Raja Harish Chandra 1913, and it's available on YouTube, and it's available definitely if you write Raja Harish Chandra on Google, you will find the film. If you are interested, you can watch the film. But you would see that Rani was actually doing what Raja wanted to do. Raja left his Raj and Rani simply followed what her husband wanted. And then Fatma Begum, it says Fatma Begum here. Fatma Begum is the first woman filmmaker of British India. She was actually a Rani. She left her Raj to start making films, and she brought her 3 daughters to Bombay cinema as well. And the 3 princesses and Fatma Begum herself was performing in films, and she was also making films. So Fatma Begum's first film is Heer Ranjha 1928. This was a silent film. After that, Ardsher Marwan Irani made first romantic musical of India. It was the first sound film of India, and the title was Alamara 1931. So you can say that India's first film with sound was only representing Muslim culture and Muslim women because Ardsher Marwan Irani produced it, and the title was Alamara. So it was actually focusing on how daughters should be, right? And then other films were produced on like Jamai Sasti, it means son-in-law's day, and Shiri Farhad, that is a folklore, right? And A.R. Kardar, uh, he's that is that Kardar family. You are familiar with Shahid Kardar, who is Vice Chancellor of BNU. You can say that this is a branch of his family. They were produced, so A.R. Kardar produced this film, Husn Ka Daku. So these films were actually focusing on female characters, and as I said earlier, that Durya Kazi said women were the center of all films, and all films focused on either falling in love with women or saving women from some attacker or rapist, etc. So Fatma Begum produced the first film, uh, silent film Heer Ranjha, and A.R. Kardar produced romantic musical Heer Ranjha 4 years after in 1932. She produced in 1927 and he produced in 1932. So this is Durya Kazi's comment that films actually showed women in stereotypical roles: poor mother, scheming mother, sister-in-law, jealous woman in a love triangle, village girl, bad girl, prostitute, madam of the brothel, wronged woman shunned by society, and occasionally the confident woman who was confident until she fell in love. So when she falls in love, all confidence disappears and she becomes domesticated. So Durya is just looking at images of women in Pakistani film over a period of time. This is what she wrote in her 2006 article. Okay. And she says that love confines women to stereotypical roles, men perform primary roles and maintain strong public profile. They are hardly shown weak, they hardly cry. They cry if mothers reject them or women reject them, but just to show their softer side for women. Okay, so here is what she said, that men are dancing with women, falling in love with women, fighting over women, avenging their honor. They are protecting women from rapists, and they are defending wives from injustices of women in law. So what it means that they are actually, women are central characters, but everything is performed by men in Pakistani musical, romantic musicals, or even crime genre films. Women are the center of the story, but men are those who control the storyline or how the stories should develop. All right. So men show their sensitivity and insensitivity about women in Najma. Najma was produced in 1970. If you have heard of film actor Shahid and film actress Rani, have you heard of them? The two were the protagonists of the film. Have you heard of Kamran Shahid? He works for Jio.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So Kamran Shahid's father was Shahid, the film actor. And Najma was Rani. She died a few years ago because of cancer. So in this film, Shahid was drunk and he tries to rape Rani. He embraces her. He's drinking alcohol and he's trying to rape her. So if you have any idea, the films are normally the film rolls that we see for that we watch for about 3 hours. A Pakistani film has hardly it would be 1,000 to 12,000 feet long, right? Which means that a 3 hours long film is about 12,000 feet long or lesser. So Najma, when it was brought to censor board for issuance of certificate, censor board actually removed about 1,000 feet of the film. So which you can easily understand that a little more than a quarter of the film was removed. Film was 3 hour film would be about 12,000 feet long. So they removed about 1,000 feet from the film. So you can say that 1/5, which will be 20% of the film, was removed. 970 something feet was removed because that footage focused on these forced embracing, drinking and raping scenes in Najma. So censor board actually said this film can't be exhibited without removing these scenes. So when they removed these scenes, they put earlier they put a triangle on the certificate, which meant excise the scenes and bring back. And when they excised the scene, they made it universal for public exhibition, right? So Durya is also saying that films show Choti Begum, Umrao Janada, who is a courtesan from 19th century India. Choti Begum, who has good wits, is the symbol of intelligent wife who uses good humor, unwavering devotion, and wits, and shows love for husband. So Choti Begum is the good Begum. Umrao Janada is the 19th century courtesan, poetess of Lucknow, to whom the best families sent their sons to learn social graces. Madam Bavri is the woman who is a crazy woman who waits to take revenge from the rapists. Okay, and she becomes calm after taking revenge from the rapist. Zarqa is the heroic Palestinian liberation fighter because Islamic countries have a strong sensitivity towards Palestine. I think I grew up hearing about this war in Palestine and having strong reaction towards Jewish community is part of having love for Palestine for many Muslims. Is that so? So Zarqa is the heroic Palestinian liberation fighter, and she never betrays her cause. So you can understand that this film was produced in 1969. So Palestine was a serious issue for a Muslim country like Pakistan back in 1960s, and it is a serious issue for Muslim countries even today. So Pakistani cinema was highlighting this Palestinian liberation fighter back in 1960s, right? And again, you can say that this is also after 1965 war. So if Pakistan did not have its own liberation fighter in the form of woman, it at least had Zarqa from Palestine to produce a film about her. And what Pakistani women try showing. Have you heard this word naqisul aql?
Yes, ma'am, we have. I have.
And what does that exactly mean?
This means somebody who is not intelligent,
Yes, it means naqis means useless. It's not of good quality, it's bad quality, or In other words, it means women hardly have intellect. Women have faulty intellect. That is the exact meaning of Naqisul Aql. And Pakistani film have a tendency of showing Naqisul Aql women. Um, we have about, I think, 1 hour or so. So we will definitely discuss 5 main types of women before reaching the end of the article. So this part, it shows that Pakistani films also have titles like Billo, Billi, or Bali. Uh, have you come across this word Billo or Billo de Kar? Kinne kinne jana hai Billo de Kar by Abrarul Haq?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am. Yes,
All
ma'am.
right. So
And
Pakistani films or songs can have this kind of titles. So this lady, Claire Pement, the name is mentioned here. She was head of department at BNU a few years back. I think she probably left in 2015, and she left BNU perhaps a year or two before 2015. Perhaps in 2014 she left BNU. She was head of TFT at the time, and she was uh, here to, I think she was in Pakistan for her own PhD research. And during the period, she started teaching at BNU, and she was there for quite some time. She was conducting research on Pakistani theater, I believe. But while conducting research, she came across these 3 types of characters. So Claire Pement actually says that Pakistani films can have titles like Billo, Billi, and Bali, right? So Bali Jati was, before Bali Jati was produced in 2000, Bali Jati was a character for Pakistani theater. And Billi, I believe, Sayyid Noor produced Billi 2000. And Billo is a 1951 film. So you can see that film is apparently 70 years ago. Pakistani films also have titles that if they are not names of women, they represent artifacts or the things that women use. For example, a film title would be Mundri, or a film title would be Najma, that is a woman's name. Mundri is because it's a symbol, it means ring, women, or jewelry that women wear on their fingers. Okay. So Billo is again a girl's name or nickname. Billi is again a girl's nickname, and Bali Jati is a character. It's a very different character from, because earlier we read about Madame Bavri. So Madame Bavri is a character that takes revenge from the rapist, and she becomes calm. Bali Jati is a character who takes revenge from the rapist, but she doesn't become calm until she repeats each and every step, each and everything that has been done to her. She takes complete revenge. So you can understand that Bali Jati is very different from Madame Bavri. Both of these women take revenge from the rapist, but Bali Jati's revenge is very different. So Claire Pement says uh, Billi and Bali are innocent girls depicted in the first two types of film. Billi means, or Billo, they are variations on cat. And Bali is somebody who is self-assertive tomboy warrior or a prostitute. She carries a Kalashnikov, embodies masculine traits, and takes on masculine speech. And masculine speech means that she can use vulgar language. Women often do not use vulgar language, but Bali Jati is a very strong woman. And she uses, in a Bali Jati film, you will definitely find ribald jugats. which means comic dialogues between the comedians, often very rude and aiming at balancing chaos, order, and diversion in plot. So you can understand that Bali Jati films will be they will have clash and culture, and they will have all kind of jugats. If you know with jugat, do you know about jugat? I believe all of you do, or some of you do, जिनको हम
Yes.
कहते हैं जुगते लगाना, जुगत लगा रहा है. So this Bali Jati films can use very insulting kind of comments. They can have masculine speech, masculine traits. So you can say that Bali Jati is more. Uh, she's not very feminine as such, and she's very revengeful. And you'll find negative or rude language in Bali Jati films. Bali claims her prey of 6 men, followed by her hunting boasts. She has to take revenge from all 6 men, and she will do everything until uh, her conquest is. It has sexual conquest, sexual innuendos, and she is a predator. Male, she attacks men. So Bali Jati is not a woman who is raped and takes revenge, and that's fine, and she becomes peaceful after that. Bali Jati actually takes, she has sexual agency. That's why I said that Bali Jati is a type of character that you'll hardly find uh, in many parts of the world, because women are not supposed to be to have predatory roles, but Bali Jati is the predator. Okay. So I mentioned Aurat Raj. Raj is mostly in men's hand in Pakistan. So Aurat Raj, you may have heard name of Rangila. Rangila was basically an actor, but he was also director. So he directed this film. So did anyone read this page? Okay. So in Aurat Raj, you must have heard name of Wahid Murad at least. You have not heard about Shahid, but have you heard of Wahid Murad?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, good to know. Wahid Murad actually was there before Shahid. He was considered chocolate hero of Pakistan, and Wahid Murad in this film, Aurat Raj, Wahid Murad is a womanizer. He ignores his wife. That is again Rani. In the film, Najma, Shahid, and Rani performed, and in this film, Aurat Raj, uh, Wahid Murad and Rani performed as protagonists. So Wahid Murad is a womanizer, and one day he decides to throw out his wife Rani. Rani, when she's a very weak woman, but when she leaves house, she joins a group of women and she forms a political party. So you can see that from a very weak housewife, she's on a journey to become the prime minister of the country. When she forms a political party, she wins the elections, and she buys a bomb from a white man, and she uses the bomb to turn men into women and women into men. So they don't change physically, but their voice changes. Men and women traits are changed. Following that blast of bomb, women start behaving like men, and men start behaving like women. So in a scene in the film, you will actually find Maula Jat running away to save his honor. And Maula Jat you'll find him saying, "Mujhe bachao, I hope these women don't rape me. In another scene, you would find Wahid Murad actually being brought to red light area in Lahore, and Rani as Prime Minister comes to watch a show performed by her former husband in the red light area. So Wahid Murad actually becomes the prostitute in the red light area, and Rani comes to watch his performance. So you can understand that film probably has very broad content, and this film was released in 1979. Who was ruling Pakistan at the time?
General Zia
Yes,
was coming.
right. So you can understand that Aurat Raj is produced against the backdrop of martial law in Pakistan. The title is Aurat Raj, and you can understand that Bhutto was in jail at the time, and Bhutto's daughter was outside Pakistan. At the time, Pakistan is producing Aurat Raj. Um, so the film focuses on a bomb. Bhutto had started nuclear program, and when he was sent to prison, Pakistan had completed the nuclear program about 90%. So when Jawhar came in power, his focus was on improving nuclear technology, and he completed the nuclear program in 1979. So Pakistan actually had the bomb in 1979, but Pakistan never tested the bomb until 1998. Who tested the bomb?
Nawaz Sharif tested.
Right. So Nawaz Sharif tested it. So we actually say that Pakistan became a nuclear power in 1998. Right? So what I'm saying that Ziaul Haq had actually completed the program in 1979, but international community never allowed Pakistan to test the nuclear bomb. International community pressurized Pakistan to not to test nuclear bomb even in 1998. Why did Pakistan test it despite the pressure?
I think there was some issues with India. Sorry, yes, I remember. India also had developed their bomb, so which is why they did it.
Maybe India had it for a long time. India had also not tested. Uh, back in 1995, France wanted to test nuclear technology, and UN and international community were pressurizing France not to test it. In 1998, Pakistan tested it because India had tested, and Pakistan and India are always competing with each other or doing things in reaction to each other. So, despite international pressure, Pakistan had to test it because India had tested it, and Pakistan wanted to display that it was a nuclear power as well. So, what is the connection between Aurat Raj and nuclear technology? I mentioned it because Aurat Raj is actually relying on a bomb to change men's voice into women's voice. So, somehow I feel that a filmmaker is actually reacting to the environment, political environment in the country. So the film is Aurat Raj, and the film actually focuses on testing bomb technology and Prime Minister, who is Sophia Bano in this film, buys the technology from a white prince. Back in 1990s, Prince Charles of UK, his name was appearing over and over again in selling arms to many countries in the world, right? So somehow it seems that Sophia Bano is buying technology from a white prince or a white man. So it sounds like that film is actually reacting to the international scene or sale of arms in the world. Okay, so as I said earlier, that filmmakers are actually very sensitive. They do not tell the stories directly. So this film is perhaps reacting to international scene and to bomb technology slightly differently. But it's also reacting to political environment by showing Aurat Raj back in 1979. And it did it so indirectly that it never faced excisions by Central Board of Film Censors. For example, there is a Pakistani film, you may have heard of it. The title is Madam Rani. Have you heard of the film? No?
No, ma'am.
So if you go to YouTube and you type here Madam Rani, this film I think may not be mentioned in this article, but I am just Madam Rani. All right, here is the film.
को गोली मारने के बाद इस तमाम गंद को जुलूस की शक्ल में थाने ले जाऊंगा।
वाह खुदा, तुमने हमें वो कुछ करने पर मजबूर कर दिया है जो हम नहीं चाहते थे।
फिलहाल धारीवाल का भाई काबू में आया है। ये तमाम सबूत जस्टिस साहब को दिखाकर उस बदकार के गोली के ऑर्डर्स ले लिए मैंने। सर सफदर खान एक बार फिर मुकदमा जीत गया है। उसने मुलजिम की जमानत करवा ली है।
All right. I think you have seen her by now. Here.
अव्वल तो हम सांप को बिल में घुसने नहीं देते।
Okay, so this is Madam Rani, and the original title of the film was General Rani. So censor board did not allow to give the title General Rani to this film. So producers had to change the title of the film before the release. So if you remember, I mentioned it yesterday, that you cannot say anything against any of the institution in the country. The film should not criticize on army, the film should not criticize on National Assembly, on High Court, or any other institution of the country. So General Rani was actually a comment on generals of Pakistan Army. So Pakistan Army Pakistan Film Censor Board did not allow to release this film by this title, General Rani. It was it was given a new title, Madam Rani. And this character actually represented uh, a woman who was very famous in those times. So even if you write her name on YouTube, you'll find some clip on that woman.
Good day.
All right. All right, so all right. So the film was about this lady.
So you mentioned how Pakistani films could not directly comment on and criticize the High Court, army, etc. But what about the introduction of satire? Because then we have Anwar Maqsood, who has based most of his film and theater career on criticizing and creating satire on Pakistani politics and major figures, including the army. So is there any transparency in this law, or is it very stringent?
We were talking about motion picture ordinance, right?
So, yes.
So most films are taken to Central Board of Film Censors for issuance of censor certificate before their release.
Yes.
Right? So Anwar Maqsood's programs do not go to Central Board of Film Censors, and we have more than 100 TV channels. When it was only Pakistan television, PTV took care of, PTV self-censored. And PTV being a state channel, it never criticized on government like that. PTV had satire in its productions. For example, in I think it was in late 1980s, must be early 90s, 1990, 91, there was a TV program, you can say it was not a soap exactly, because PTV has hardly produced soaps. It was a comedy show. Its title was Ba Adab Ba Mlaiza, right?
Yes.
I'm sure it was on air in 1991, and there must be at least 13 episodes of Ba Adab Ba Mlaiza. So in Ba Adab Ba Mlaiza, you would see a king sitting on his throne, and you would see ministers standing in front of him. And I clearly remember that in one of the programs, the king asked Minister of Education to read the letter, and somebody informed him that Minister of Education cannot read, right? So this production actually reflected on what was happening in the country, because I think around that time we had a minister who could actually not read, Minister of Education who could not read. So you can say that drama actually commented on the government. But films are normally taken to Central Board of Film Censors, and Central Board of Film Censors look at the rules, and if the rule says you cannot comment on institution, they would not allow you to exhibit film until you change or remove whatever comments on the institution. So this film was actually, the title actually commented on a relationship of Aqleem Akhtar and General Yahya Khan. So they did not allow to use that title. They said you can release the film because in the film, Nadeem being a police officer actually investigate Aqleem Akhtar and investigates Madam Rani, not Aqleem Akhtar. I said the film actually was a comment on Aqleem Akhtar, and they said you cannot release this film.
Oh, okay. So there was a difference in the censor board for films, like motion pictures and television shows.
See, Pembra looks at, Pembra can send a notice to a channel, but
Okay.
yeah, so Central Board of Film Censor is a different department.
Oh,
And
okay. That makes
yes,
sense because
film is a different medium also. Film is a big screen, and if you think that big screen has a stronger influence on the viewer, so what we show on big screen becomes extremely important. And Pembra is responsible for small screens, and it is very difficult to keep track of what 100 or 150 channels are showing right now. So what they'll normally do, they will just ask them that you are bound by these rules, but it would be very difficult to individually watch content of every film shown on TV or every program shown on TV. So there's a difference between big screen and small screen. And small screen, for small screen, we have a board of 12 members. And at Pembra, we have perhaps hundreds of employees, but I don't think they will be looking into the content that deeply. So we would have laws. So channels should not disturb social order. Somebody mentioned Kun Fayakun yesterday and said that the GeoTV was asked to change the title. So I'm sure that notice must have come from Pembra because of various reasons. People may have complained, or Pembra may have taken notice itself.
Ma'am, I had a question. All of these movies seem very grounded into the socio-political reality at that time. So, and which is surprising because I don't think any of us knew these before this class. So, ma'am, my question is, do you think that the movies being made now are as intelligent as these, or are they approaching such concepts in a better way or something?
For that, we'll have to select a movie and look at the content of the film. I said, that filmmaker is normally a very sensitive person, and he is responding, or she is responding to social realities or political realities of the time. We only need to see closely when a film is produced and why it is produced, or why it has certain type of content. So I'm sure that, for example, if you talk to Nasir Adib, he would say, who actually wrote the script, his screenwriter for Maulajat, right? So Nasir Adib says he wrote the script in reaction to Zia's policies, because when he not just Zia's policies, but state policies or role of a police officer in the country, because he says when he was young, or he was a kid, he actually woke up one day and found that a police officer was beating his father's head with his shoe, and police officer had actually entered his house. So he said that later, when he became a screenwriter, he wrote this story because he thought Maulajat could fight the system, right? So these stories may look very ordinary, but they do definitely have a strong political background behind them. So that's why I said that when these two researchers came from France to Pakistan, because they wrote that article very recently, 6-7 years ago, the article about Umar Marvi, they were actually looking at Umar Marvi against the political backdrop in 1956, because government had eliminated individual identities of the 4 provinces and merged them into one unit, right? Okay.
So this makes a lot of sense. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so here we see the film Kismet that I had mentioned, I think even yesterday, that Kismet 1956 focuses on strong women who voice their right to divorce, right? I think Hum TV is showing a play at present. You may have come across it, or you can look for it on YouTube. The title is, let me look for it here. No, I can't see the title here. Hum TV plays. You may have heard of Is Pyar Ke Sadke. Have you heard of it?
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
Yes.
Let me find episode. I think in this episode there is a scene when, perhaps not in this one, let me find a different episode. Episode 20 probably. Yes. All right. If you've heard of this play, in one of the episodes, her husband hits her. I'm not sure which episode it is, but I think somewhere here. So her husband hits her, and the father says, father asks the husband, why did you hit my daughter? And the husband says, because she sent me a divorce notice. And the father says, इसको बहुत पहले भेज देना चाहिए था, because you have hit her. Right? So I think this is probably the first time a Pakistani play is showing that father is supporting divorce of her father, of his daughter, because he actually tells the son-in-law कि इसको तुम्हें बहुत पहले divorce notice भेज देना चाहिए था. Has anyone else seen this play?
Miss Vajira, I think लेकिन the overall image of the girl is negative, कि उसका जो character है वो negative है. तो ये portion में ऐसा होगा, लेकिन overall उसका image यहाँ पे character negative है.
हाँ, I understand कि character तो definitely negative है. Character definitely negative है, but Hum TV showed another play जिसका नाम था, I think, Inkar. Have you heard of the play?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So, do you know what it was about?
It was about Khatija Siddiqui case, I guess, based on that.
All right. Because
I am coming for 7th Hum Awards happening on Saturday, 5th October at NRG Arena.
गवाहान को लेके आए ले जा रहा है इसके वॉइस मैसेजेस.
Right, because she refused to marry the guy. She was interested in him at the start, but then she ditched him and became interested in his friend. And what's his name? Imran Ashraf?
Yes, ma'am, Imran Ashraf.
Right. So Imran Ashraf could not understand her no. So I think he tried to, he attacked her, stabbed her a few times, and then this police case started. So Inkar actually focuses on woman's no, right? And this play, this play is not exactly like that, but what I found interesting about this character, that her father is actually supporting her divorce, and he says, I understand that she's a negative character so far, but the father actually supports the idea of divorce. So I thought that was interesting, because Pakistani divorce is a reality, but Pakistani uh, film and plays actually not try not to promote the idea of divorce. So here the father actually says कि बहुत पहले divorce ले लेना चाहिए थी, बहुत पहले कर देनी चाहिए थी. So I thought it was interesting that Pakistani play is actually saying divorce is good. When the husband hits her, the father says divorce is good. So Kismet 1956 focuses on strong women who voice their right to divorce. Okay, so this is a 1956 film, and the film is highlighting right to divorce. And in this film, when the woman asks for divorce, she has a nightmare, and in the nightmare she sees, like half of the film is based on her nightmare, and in the nightmare she sees what happens to her after the divorce. Her husband dies, her father dies, and then her daughter also dies. And when the daughter dies, she wakes up and she runs to her husband, and she says that she doesn't want divorce anymore, because in the dream she learns that after divorce she is unable to support her daughter because she was only an 8th grader. Earlier in the film, when Dr. Saab come to her house for Rishta, the younger sister is studying at the university. She's doing her master's, and the elder brother says she's no good for marriage. She's a wannabe. Don't marry her. So in the end, the film actually wants to give this message that less educated girls are better marriage material and highly educated girls are bad marriage material, because highly educated women are wannabes and they are not good for family. Okay, so I already mentioned The Daughter of Today. This was Pakistan's first film, and this film also supported, I said it is, it looks like an adaptation of the American Daughters of Today, and the American film focused on indiscretion, disaster, awakening of a modern woman, जो कि शहर में आके खराब हो गई यूनिवर्सिटी लाइफ के दौरान, and later her cousin comes from the village to rescue her from the city people, as she was arrested for the murder of the rapist or the attacker. Now the last 5 women, the protagonists. I think we'll be discussing a couple of these 2 protagonists in another article, Visual Pleasure as well. So I would just briefly touch on the first 2 because we will discuss them in detail later in another article. So It just says that over 70 years, because earlier our focus was on producing Urdu films. And do you know when we started producing more films in regional languages? We were definitely producing Punjabi and Urdu films when Pakistan became independent. We produced first Sindhi film in 1956, and we produced first Pashto film in 1970s. So you know that we started producing Sindhi films long before Pashto films, at least 15 years earlier. Pakistan produced only 76 or 77, you can say, Sindhi films. Pakistan has produced 700-800 Pashto films since 1970s. We are not producing Sindhi or Pashto film at present. I think we are hardly producing Punjabi films at the moment. Right? So, as I mentioned, you'll find these 5 types of protagonists are actually from Urdu and Punjabi films, mostly from Punjabi films. Total number of Pakistani, Urdu and Punjabi films is almost the same. Though NAFDEC was an institution that Pakistan established back in, I think, 70s, and they desired that every filmmaker should go to NAFDEC for approval of their stories and approval of ideas for film. So NAFDEC was pressurizing filmmakers for quite some time to make Urdu films. And it doesn't mean that it was not giving permission for producing Punjabi film or films in other languages. It was giving permission, but emphasis was on Urdu films for quite some time. So Urdu films promoted back in 1970s, 60s, and in many of the Urdu films, you'll find that women look very traditional, submissive, modest. If you find 1960s films, you would realize that, can you describe any women from the films of the past? Can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Yes.
So this is a woman from the past films, 60s and 70s film. Let's see.
से पहली सी मुहब्बत मेरे महबूब नवा मुझसे पहली सी मुहब्बत मेरे महबूब नवा मुझसे पहली सी मुहब्बत मेरे महबूब.
Yes, what is she doing? And can you describe her?
She's singing a song.
Oh, could you hear the song?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, you could not see it. Did you
No, we
see?
can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, you
Yeah, we
can
did.
see it. So I'm just asking you to describe, like what do you think she's looking like?
A pious,
Can you describe her?
according to like.
Ji, can you describe her? Because according to the article, she is the Chui Mui girl. Chui Mui girl from 1960s films and 1970s film, and you can understand that this lady represents a specific kind of culture. You can see what kind of dress she is wearing, what she's looking like, and how she's behaving. It starts here. Look at her dress, and now, what kind of dress is she wearing? Very, very traditional dress, fully covering her body with a dupatta. And where is she looking? She does not look into the camera at all. She does not make an eye contact with the viewer. So she is, that's why I said she is
very shirmili.
Ji?
She seems to be very shirmili and very fragile looking.
Yes, of course, very Sharmili, very fragile looking, and she is somebody who cannot make eye contact with the viewer. And we discussed who is the viewer in most cases.
It's the men.
Yes, male viewer. Male viewer in the cinema. So this woman is, she has a certain body language or certain type of presentation for the male viewer in the cinema. And is she beautiful? Is she beautiful?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Right. So this is Shamimara from 1962, right? You said earlier these films look very political and sensitive content-wise. Shamimara's first film was Kamari Beva. Do you understand what it means? Kamari is somebody who is not married yet.
Yeah.
So in
And Beva
Pakistani,
widow,
yes,
right?
yes. So, and Beva is somebody who has been married, right? So it's
Yes.
very interesting that her first film's title was Kamari Beva, because title means that she never got married, and Beva means her husband died. So I haven't seen that film. I think it's not available on YouTube. But again, I think that the title sounds very intriguing. So that was Shamimara's first film, and I'm sure it may have been interesting. This was a super hit film, and as I mentioned, that NAFDAC often pressurized directors to make Urdu films than Punjabi or a film in another language regional language. Because you can see that she's wearing the dress of Urdu-speaking elite of Delhi and Lucknow. And in Pakistan, she represents a culture that Pakistanis did want their daughters to behave like this for a very long time. Or if you have heard the terminologies like Sharmo Haya ki Putli or Sharmili, not just Sharmili, balki Sharmo Haya ki Putli, because Pakistanis have appreciated Sharmo Haya ki Putli for a very, very long time. And in past, people did want to demand that they wanted a woman, they wanted a match for a girl who was very traditional like her. And they thought somebody who was not traditional was bad woman. So Shamimara here represents a good woman who is very, very traditional and somebody who is yearning in privacy for a male. But she will never tell the male that she is interested in him. And if she has to communicate her feelings to a male, she will probably find an acquaintance to communicate her feelings to the male. So she is yearning for him in privacy, but when she will see him, she will probably deny that she's interested in him. So that was part of the training. Do you disagree with what I have said? It's a 1962 film, and people did want their daughters to be like Shamimara at the time. In a film, you often found a father who would tell his daughter कि अब तुम्हारा उस घर से जनाजा निकले, which means it sounds like that father was telling her कि violence बर्दाश्त कर लेना. Right? Are you guys tired? All right. I would briefly mention the other. I think I have already mentioned the other. In these 5 characters, you will find Madam Babri and Bali Jatti. We have briefly discussed what type of characters those two are. Apart from the 2, there are 2 more characters who are mentioned here. One is Jatti. We saw Jatti in the earlier dance clip, right? And Jatti is definitely from a Punjabi film. So Jatti in many cases is as traditional as is Chui Mui Girl of Urdu film. I think I will be winding up this lecture soon, so I should quickly show you what a Jatti looks like. So this was the Chui Mui Girl, and let's find a Jatti.
ना पहलवान भी है चल सजा या फल कनो चल बजा हज का
All right. Did you recognize who she is? This is Noor Jahan, Madam Noor Jahan, when she was acting in films. So she is the protagonist here, right? And she is performing the role of a typical jatti. You can see that this jatti is very different from Shamimara. Right? So Noorjahan here is as traditional as is Shamimara, but Shamimara was yearning all by herself, and Noorjahan is like Jatti here is very independent. She's going around town in the village. She's going around, moving around with her friends in the village, and you can see that boys stop her, and she's confidently handling this gang of boys. So this is a typical jatti. So both jatti and Chuimi girls are traditional girls, but you can see that Chuimi girl is very different from Punjabi jatti. All right. And as I said, we will discuss these things in visual pleasure in greater detail, but I would quickly show you the last one, just our image. So the last one would be Heer of Heer Ranjha, right? Sorry, it's very loud. So this is Heer of Heer Ranjha, and Heer is a decision maker. She follows Ranjha around. Ranjha is more feminine, and she is more. You can say that she, being a decision maker, she is stronger than Ranjha in many cases. So we will discuss these women in detail in one of the other lectures, but these are the 5 types of
even in the stories like Soni Mahiwal, it is shown that how it is Soni who travels and swims through the river and goes and meets the boy, the Mahiwal, and it's always the women who are making most of the effort, and that's what the films are showing. Even in this was He Ranja you just showed, so I remember that we even discussed this with Tariq Chaiman Saab, our dean, and he was talking about how the female figure was, wasn't like she doesn't have, the guts or something like that. She was shown the stronger one, और उस तरह से, और उन्होंने बल्कि कुछ इंसिडेंट्स भी उस सोनी महिवाल वाले उसमें से उन्होंने हमें बताए थे. These were the written ones, and even when the films are made on the same stories. So yeah, the women were shown in a very different style even.
Right, absolutely right. There's a difference between Punjabi and Urdu and Sindhi films, definitely, and we have not produced many Sindhi films. I said 76, and you will find 77 in the directory because 1956 film was dubbed and re-released in 1963. So that's how you end up with 77 number, but they are basically 76 films. A Sindhi person would normally say that Punjabi film, that a Sindhi film is not a real Sindhi film because you are actually seeing people in Sindhi dress, but it looks like a Punjabi formula film. So authenticity is another thing. But definitely you are right that films do present women in different ways. So Urdu films were often presenting Chui Mui girls, while an ordinary Jatti, Dunur Jahan was in the role of ordinary Jatti, just uh, who is as traditional as is Chui Mui girl. I'm saying as traditional because both of them know the cultural norms and they stick to cultural norms. Here does not stick to the norm. She is generous. She has premarital relationship. She has extramarital relationships. She runs away with Ranjha. And in many cases, men would say that Heer is the epitome of love. So Heer is not hated for her premarital or extramarital relationships. She faces honor killing, yet she is tremendously loved by people of the subcontinent for the past 800 years, I would say, because Damodar Dutt created this character back in 13th century. And it is Heer is not a creation of. आपने किसका नाम सुना था?
मतलब मैम क्या पूछा आपने? I didn't understand.
I asked who created Heer.
I didn't ask that.
जी?
मैंने नहीं पूछा था मैम.
नहीं, I am asking. Who created Heer?
Waris Shah?
Yes, we know Heer Waris Shah, right? But
Yes.
Waris Shah did not create Heer. Heer, yes, Damodar Dutt created Heer.
Oh, okay, yes.
And Damodar Dutt created Heer in 13th century. Waris Shah is pretty recent, right? So, and Damodar Dutt was a non-Muslim. So I find it quite interesting that a non-Muslim created Heer. All right. And Heer faces honor killing. She's a decision maker. She has premarital relationship, extramarital relationship. She leaves her husband and runs away with Ranjha. And finally, she faces honor killing. So Heer is very different from ordinary Jatti. Noorjahan is playing the role of ordinary Jatti. She knows her norms. She follows the norms. And Chui Mui girls also follows the norms, right? And Chui Mui girl does not make an eye contact, while all Jattis make eye contact. And all Jattis are Punjabi women. And Chui Mui girl is the protagonist from Urdu films. Okay, and I think with this I have basically briefed you on the female representations. In the end, it only says that most films emphasize on passive, silent women, Urdu films in particular, emphasize on passive women, silent women. These women are defined by their physical attributes. This kind of discussion will definitely reappear in visual pleasure in Pakistani cinema, so I will not go into in detail here. So because we will be discussing her again later. And in the end, the article only says that I have already told you what ordinary Jatti looks like, and I showed you a scene from Pate Khan. Dadu is the guy who stopped the girls, and Noorjahan actually tells her कि जाके अपनी बहन को देखो, which is a typical dialogue in Pakistan. So it's quite interesting when Dadu keeps looking for his own sister. Meena and Pate Khan are sitting under a tree talking to each other, and I have briefly described Heer, and I said we will go back to her when we discuss. Yes, one more character, Dirty Dancer. Dirty Dancer is the one जो के rain dance करती है, and you can see that she's revealing. Dirty Dancer will definitely reappear in our discussion on visual pleasure, so I think we will discuss her there again. In the end, it only says that many of Pakistani films have titles. I have already mentioned that title are either by women's names or by the names that or the artifacts that women use. It could be mundri, it could be nath, it could be dupatta. So these are the things that belong to women. And many films have the title of Beti. So Pakistan has produced about 20 films uh, that you can say had this title Beti, Beta, or Beti, Ladli Beti, Pyari Beti. And the last one was Dukhtar. I think it was produced 3-4 years ago, and a woman filmmaker made the film Dukhtar.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I actually thought the movie it was a little different than compared to the other stereotypes. It was really good.
I'm sure it was. So finally, it was a woman's film. So it's we can look at it that when women make a film, how a woman's film is different from a film made by a man. Okay, I think we have these strategies of Chui Mui Girl and Rain Dancers. We will discuss these strategies in visual pleasure. Okay, in the other article on visual pleasure. Anything else about what we discussed today? Anything that was not clear or any question? All right. I think we should end the session then. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.